Hi, and welcome back to this Gorilla Academy. This is going to be all about consumer psychology, and I'm really excited to be working with our brand new shop builder tool. So the task I've decided to build, and there were so many to choose from, I have to say, so many experiments out there. The one we've decided to go with this is something known as a mood induction paradigm. Mood induction is basically where you try and influence somebody's mood to make them feel more happy or more sad. And we want to see if this has an effect on purchasing. Does this change the way that you buy things in an online shop? Now, I couldn't find a specific paper that's done this before. I found this one that I quite like by Steve Stanton, looking at the effect of induced mood on economic choices. And what they've done here is they've used mood induction on something known as, as a probabilistic discounting task or a gambling task. But the kind of thing that they're looking at here is something known as loss aversion. Now, if you want, I talk a little bit about loss aversion and framing effects in my social lecture in the Gorilla Academy, and you can find that on one of the links on the left-hand side. Just if you don't want to go back and watch that, I think you should. I think it was quite a good one I did. Loss aversion is basically this idea that we are more sensitive to losses than we are to gains. So I can present this offer to a participant, and it says you will receive $75. You have a choice now between losing $45 or taking a gamble where you've got the green is about 40%. So let's say that means there's a 40% chance that you could keep everything, and the red means you'll lose everything. And I could take this exact same question and I can reframe it, and I could say you've received $75. Do you want to keep $30 or do this gamble? Now, mathematically, it's the exact same thing. The difference between losing $45 from 75, well, you're left with $30. If I say keep $30, same thing. However, we are much more sensitive to losses than we are to gains. And what they wanted to do here is they wanted to see whether mood induction affected that. Now, we're not as interested in this part, although I do like my value-based decision-making and behavioral economics. I'm mostly interested, obviously, in mood induction. So, as I usually say, go to the last paragraph of your introduction, and this will tell you about their hypotheses. And what they wanted to do here, they didn't have a directional hypothesis. So this is a kind of a discovery science project. They wanted to compare gambling rates and framing effects after sad, happy, and neutral mood states. So there's a kind of a categorical comparison between subjects. They also wanted to look at individual differences. So they ran a correlation to see if people who were more influenced by the mood induction also showed a greater shift in preferences. So when we come to thinking about our analysis, then this tells us already we probably want to do a categorical comparison, but it could also be good to do a correlational analysis and see whether there's any difference in the correlations. If I scroll down here, the subjects tells us about subjects. They had close to 100 people in theirs, so we should aim for similar. And the task itself is broken up into 4 task blocks. And the first thing they do is they get people to do a rating, what they call valence and arousal. Now, valence and arousal are basically words to say, well, arousal is obvious and how calm or excited you are. Valence is a word that basically means your emotional state, how positive or negative is something. That's what the valence refers to. Something with very low valence is usually a negative stimulus, so it could be something that's fearful or sad. Something with a positive valence, something that is happy or exciting. And they ask people to make these ratings on a 9-point scale. So 2 questions with a 9-point scale. After the rating, they do a mood induction task. And I got into a bit of a wormhole here because there's so much about emotion mood induction. It's a massive literature all by itself. One of the ways you can do mood induction is to ask people to basically imagine an event. So imagine a time in your life when you were really happy, and close your eyes and do that for 5 minutes. Or imagine a time in your life when you were really stressed, and do this for 5 minutes. It works, but it's not as good as using movies. Movies seems to give you a stronger mood induction effect, probably because it is an externally driven rather than an internally driven effect. And there are loads of studies out there that have validated movies. So let's take, this is one example of a study, the experimental movies in inducing emotions in neuroscience, a paper in PLOS. And they list a bunch of films in here that they have validated. And I just want to scroll down just because they have a really nice plot here, this plot, which essentially shows you, this is valence at the bottom. So again, more negative valence, bad things, more positive, more happy things, and arousal. And you can see that you have this U-shaped curve where things with a negative valence often have high arousal. So things that evoke fear. It can be very negative, but at the same time, a horror film makes you jump. It keeps you on edge. Same as something that's really fun and happy and excites you. That's also going to be positive, but high in arousal. Whereas something in the middle, neutral stimuli, typically they're always low in valence. They're middle in valence, they're low in arousal. And you often see this kind of dynamic. So like I said, and you can see in this paper, they have a list of different films, which fall into different categories. So we've got scenery, which are kind of the boring ones. Usually, we have fear, compassion, we had erotic things. So all these different movie clips that you could use. There's also this by Samson, which is not a movie based, because you might have issues with licensing, whether you can use movies in your experiment. So here they've created their own stimulus set, which you can download from their website. You just have a form that you need to fill in here. It's for research purposes only, I have to say. So I, in the end, decided on this data set that I found by Samadi. And this is basically using news archive clips. And they created, I think it's 126 different news clips. They're positive and negative, neutral stories. And what's great about this, they have a really wonderful GitHub. So it goes to News Archive, and I think a bit further down here. So on their lab, it links to a GitHub page, and there's a simple R script that basically you just have to set your path and click go, and the R script will go to the News Archive website. It will take all of the movies, crop out the time that you want, and save them out. So this was a really great stimulus set, and it has so much information. The spreadsheet gives you everything you could think about in terms of arousal ratings, valence ratings, differences in gender. It has so many, everything is beautifully catalogued. So you've got lots of information. And I've included that in the spreadsheet in the mood induction over here. One thing we found with this is the movies themselves came out they were .mp4 files, but actually they weren't working. The first 10 seconds was just blank, and there was, I think, audio, but no video. If I ran it on my computer, it was fine, but it didn't work well on the Gorilla website. So I did what I recommend all of you guys do. I put in a support ticket, and our support team, wonderful support team, got back to me very quickly. And they basically said there's sometimes an issue with MP4 files if they're encoded in an old format. So you can use a program, I use one called Handbrake, and there are some other ones out there, which basically let you upload a video, and then you click, and it upgrades and re-encodes the video formatting. So it looks like the exact same file. It's got a kind of version 2.0 MP4 format. And that fixed a problem that I had with this. So if you want to use the same data set, just as a word of warning, you're going to need to re-encode these files. But it was so easy. I used Handbrake, and it was a batch, drag and drop. Everything was sorted. Okay, so let's start looking at this. This is my experiment tree. And we've got a randomizer node where people are randomly allocated. For every 6 people that come into the experiment, 2 will go on to do a happy mood induction, 2 will go on to a neutral, 2 will go on to a sad. And what I've done here is I've created one task, but I have 3 different spreadsheets. And I use a different spreadsheet here so that people have different stimuli. If we go into the mood induction, it's again, very straightforward paradigm. I'm just going to click on edit to reopen it. Click on the plus to start building your displays. So I started with an instructions display. I have 3 here, happy, sad, and neutral. I don't know why I did it this way, to be honest. With hindsight, I could have just had one called task, and that would have worked fine. I don't know why I actually made 3. It just made life more complicated for myself, because now, as you'll see in my spreadsheets, my happy spreadsheet calls on happy. My sad spreadsheet calls on the display sad, and my neutral spreadsheet calls on neutral. In fact, I should have just had them all call on task. So it works, and I think this is one of those things as well with Gorilla. Don't worry if it's inelegant. Like I say, this is not the most elegant design, but this is how you learn, and the next time I have to do this, I'll know next time to do a better job, and I can simplify it. All I've done here is go onto the plus. I added a template screen, which is rich text, and in this rich text zone, you just click on it and start typing, and adding in your instructions. If I show you here, all I've got here with the instructions just says you're about to watch 4 clips, and then you use these double asterisks to make the things in bold that are important. And what I wanted to say here was that if a clip makes you uncomfortable, you can withdraw at any time, because the negative valence films are quite negative, in fact. So I want to, from an ethical point of view, it's very important to say, yes, like, if you're not comfortable watching these videos, you should withdraw at any time, just by closing the browser. For the actual task, we just have our crosshair, and then what I did here was I built this from scratch. So I took a blank screen, like so, edit layout, add zone, and this is my zone. If I click on that, and content, I say video zone, and now it's just a case of making it the right size. And you can see, as I click on the white, you can see the numbers, which tells me a bit about how big it is. So I can say, make that 60, so it takes up 60% of the screen. And there we go. Now, there's issues with autoplay, with audio and video, and this is nothing to do with Gorilla, this is just something about browsers, because you've probably noticed it doesn't happen as much anymore. You open a browser and there's just music coming from somewhere. Everyone agreed that that was annoying. So all the browsers came together and said, we're going to stop that. We're going to put restrictions on autoplay. People will have to click if they want to hear music or videos or adverts. So that makes things difficult for Gorilla for autoplay. So if possible, and by default, we say set it to 1, which means people have to click play to show the video. This works for me as well, again, from that ethical point of view, that we don't just start playing them something that could be quite traumatic. It could be quite a harmful video. They have to click to essentially say, yes, I'm okay watching this video. The only other thing to change was set this to a 1. So the 1s and 0s are like switches. 1 means on, 0 means off. And by setting this to 1, what I've said is that when this movie finishes, I want to automatically move on to the next movie and the next trial. Now you can see that I embellished it a bit more. I just added in some text zones to say the following clip is about short label, and it's in green, which tells me this is a spreadsheet variable. And we can see that here. As part of the spreadsheet that came with the stimulus set, it has a short label, which, for example, in this case on the neutral, prescription drug abuse. So I can tell my participants, this video is going to be about prescription drug abuse. Do you want to proceed? And again, we've got just a warning here that tells people they can leave the experiment if they don't want to watch the video. Also a progress bar. We saw this at the Be Online conference. A lot of people were talking about the benefits of progress bars. I think I was one of them, in fact. If participants don't know how long an experiment goes on for, they could commit for a certain amount of time and just say, oh, you know what? I'm done. I'm out. A progress bar is a great way to say to somebody, look, you're almost at the end, keep going. So it can really help reduce attrition. So I added a little progress bar for the videos in here. And that's it. That's my mood induction experiment. I've got my videos, and I've got my 3 different spreadsheets, and we can see my experiment tree. I'm using 3 different spreadsheets to get 3 different versions of one task. Nice and easy. Now, we want to know whether our mood induction worked. Did it make people feel happier or sadder? So you can just ask people, valence and arousal. I went with something called the PANAS, which seems a very well validated affect scale, essentially. And I can just show you here. Very little to do in this case. Copy and paste from the PANAS, from the original paper, which I think is from Watson in 1988. There's a, Watson 1988, there's a link to it up here if you want to find the original file. And then all I've done here, I've used our grid radio buttons, which is really nice if you have a long questionnaire. You don't want to have to make a separate like art for each one of these, you can just say, these are my items on the y-axis, so to speak. And then on the x-axis, I've got my response options, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which equate to these items up here. Same thing you would have in a normal spreadsheet, in a normal questionnaire as well. So yeah, there we go. That's, that was again a nice easy copy and paste to get that into here. So after that, we move on to our instructions. Now I want to preview this because the important thing to remember with the instructions is you're not there. So you need to try and figure out what participants are going to, I guess, get wrong, or what's, where the stumbling blocks are without having to see them. And you can be a bit creative. So obviously here, the shop builder tasks, once they've done their mood inductions, we can tell them, imagine you're going to a friend's house for dinner. Your task is to buy a bottle of wine and a dessert. And obviously we want to see if they go for really cheap wine or do they go for really expensive wine. We have some extra details in here. For example, there are 4 people, so you know how much you need to buy roughly. We ask people as well, please choose things that you would likely buy using your own money. It's always an issue with economics paradigms. How do you make sure that people make realistic choices? In this case, the best we could do was just ask them. What I then did, so after the text-based instructions, I had some pictures just to show them the shop so that they are aware of what's going to happen. Here I said these are the categories, and you can click on them to see the different items. This is something I found a lot of people, in piloting, I found a lot of people miss the page button. So, especially because the items are ordered from cheapest to most expensive, it's very important that they're aware there's a page button and they can see more items. So highlight that to them. And then as well, we have instructions. So if you ever need to see what you're doing again, there's instructions, and click the question mark. So there we go. That's kind of our instructions. And my point really with this is just to make sure that you are as, how do I say it? I was going to say flamboyant, but I don't feel that's the right word. Basically, be creative, essentially, with your instructions. You can't be too detailed. So always go to the side of having more information than you actually need. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to start building a shop. So let's get into our shop builder. I'm quite excited for this. You should all now see this under Create, under New Tools. I'm going to make something called Demo Shop from scratch. And we click on Edit to get this open. I've also, just on the side here, I went to Support and I typed in Shop, and you'll get our shop builder support pages. And there's great content on here. There's actually as well a demo dataset. So if you want, you can download our toy shop if you want to have a practice. Because I think the thing that takes the longest, in fact, is building this stimulus set. And I didn't build this myself. I went to Nielsen IQ's brand bank and we bought a dataset from them. And thanks to Ollie for getting this done really quickly. What we got from this is a product name and a product image. And we also got something called an EAN number, which is a specific number about the item. So if you wanted to get more information about this item or more kind of related content, you could use that as well. So going back to our shop builder, on the products page, we basically need to upload this spreadsheet. You can see here, if I go to our shop builder and I go to products, there are some default categories that you have to have. You have to have product, which is the name, obviously. You need to have an image that's associated with the item and a price. Typically as well, you need to have pack size and unit size. It's not very important in this experiment, so I just wrote 1 in each and just dragged that for everything. But there are some instances where it's important to be able to calculate this is actually a 4-pack item. It's not a single item. So that's something that's quite important for some of the tools. Doesn't matter for today. So if I go here, upload, and let's upload, and there we go. I've uploaded my stimulus set. I've got 319 items in my shop. I can actually search for items using the search function in here if I want to change anything. And the one thing at the moment, and this is something to point out, the categories is quite important. So if I show you what the final shop actually looks like, you can see here we have our categories bar, but you need to tell Gorilla what the categories are. So I need to click up here on the categories tab, go to add, and my category column. Now, unfortunately, you need to do this before you upload the dataset. So it won't know it now. If I go to upload, and I just upload the file again, you can see now the categories has disappeared. And that's because it's been recognized as a product headings column. And if I already, actually let's get some images, go to add assets. I'm not going to add everything because like it's 320 stimuli, it takes a little bit of time. So I'm just going to grab, let's take those, upload. So I'm just going to upload these 60 images. This is a starting point. You can see it's the same idea as Task Builder. You can see it uploads very quickly. But yeah, 300 is just going to take a bit more time. Done. I've got my stimuli in here. If I click on preview, my shop is basically there. I can see here I've got my different categories of products. And let's go to wine. I can see my different pictures where I've uploaded them. Then you can see here, if I click on it, it goes to a title and the amount that it costs. So at the moment, obviously one issue is the appearance. You can't see add to basket because it's white on white text. So if we just click on the back button, it takes us back to our shop, and that takes us to appearance. And here you need what's called a hex code. And it's very easy. You can just go into Google, type in a color hex code, and it will tell you what the hex code is. I'm going to go for red, which I know is FF0000. You can see here, that's what it's come up with. So I can say that's going to be the color of our shop, and the button color is going to be the same. If you want here as well, this is where you can change your currency. You can add a shop logo if you like. Limit the items per page. And this links to a very interesting behavioral economics phenomenon called the paradox of choice, where if we have too many options, we stop making decisions. I think the optimal is about 6. Once we go beyond 6, we are less likely to buy something. So you can sort this in here if you want as well, things like show item count, see how many items you've got in your basket. If I click on preview now, our shop has now changed, and you can now see that the buttons I can read add to basket. If I click on it, it starts adding my items in. So there we go. That's all it takes to build a shop. The thing you're going to spend the longest time on, in fact, is building your stimulus set. Now we've got our foundation shop, I just want to talk about some of the options that I think are really cool. Things like landing page products, for example. If I show you on the support page, what this basically lets you do is this first page, when you come to the shop, is blank. But you could load up some featured items. So you could basically write here something called featured, and I could put a 1 by certain items. And they're going to, in my landing page product, I'm going to say match field featured 1. So any item that has a 1 in the column featured will show up here as a featured item, which is in itself a really nice new experiment. Does mood induction mean that you just go for featured items and you do what you're more likely to take what you're presented with? Or do you explore more if you're in a different mood? Another really great question I think you could do with Shop Builder. What you'll see when I click on preview here, very similar to a task builder, we have different manipulations. So all the different things that I've set up, and I can have more than one version in here. So I'll go to checkouts in a second. I've set up what I call the defaults. Instructions, I've used that in here. I've put instructions. I'll just show you actually what that looks like. So here under instructions, it says instructions and what they need to do. But you could have multiple. So I could click add condition, and I could add instructions too. So I could have, and I could then say, do people behave differently when I give them different instructions? So swaps is the one that I really love. You've obviously got discounts. You could do some really cool studies on maybe anchoring effect. And it's worth looking up anchoring effects. We've got some stuff on that on our Gorilla Insights. But you could see whether mood induction changes anchoring effects. So are you more susceptible to discounts if you're in a happy mood versus if you're sad? The swaps Does the mood induction mean that you're more likely to take a swap? This is when, for example, let's say you're buying loads of really high salt, high fat items in shopping basket. It can come up, say, hi, I can see you're buying a lot of fats. Would you like to buy this low fat alternative? Maybe we're more sensitive to swaps if we're in a good mood, or if we're in a bad mood. Like I say, there's loads of different questions that you can address in Shop Builder that aren't consumer questions. I think they're questions about, the role of emotion in our lives, questions about social psychology. Are we more or less susceptible to influence at different points? There are memory tests. We've put in a shopping list to remind people they need to buy a dessert and a wine. Now, you could do shopping lists that are generic, or you could do shopping lists that are brand specific. And this is actually fundamentally a question about memory, but it's a memory question that's embedded in a real life situation, shopping, rather than something artificial like learning random lists of words. So I think that for me, this is really the beauty of Shop Builder. And there are so many items. You can see I don't have enough time to go through every single one of these items. Look at our support page and they'll go through all the different wonderful options we have to do with basket ratings and basket distributions. There's some great talks as well from Be Online by Pasquale and Dimitris, which talk about using these kinds of items, using swaps and using basket controls to tell people about how they're shopping. You can have initial items placed in the basket to see whether you go with that or if you change it. Like I say, the options are endless. Shop Builder is so incredibly flexible right now. I'm just going to go back to our experiment now, and what we're going to see after people completed the shop, we just had some basic experimental questions: participant gender, age, household income, how often do you use online supermarkets? In terms of shopping behavior as well, we can ask some interesting questions about, did they choose items based on choice or price, or did they choose items because of dietary requirements? Maybe they're vegan, so they would have brought a specifically vegan wine or vegan dessert. Are they on a diet right now? Do they drink alcohol? These are important questions. It's always better to have information than to not have information. I don't have time to analyze all of these different things that we've included, because we've also included, in fact, something called the BIS, which is the Barrett Impulsivity Scale. That's in there too. I don't have time to go through all of these. The data set is free to download. I would love to know if people really explore this data set and see what they can come up with. I'd be very excited to know more about what people find. Is there a relationship between impulsivity and what people buy and how long they're in the store? That's a great question. Whether that's affected by mood and interacted or modulated by mood is another great question. And like I say, download the data set, find out for yourselves. What we're going to do right now is we're going to start analyzing the data set together. I'll see you in the next video.